Good afternoon and welcome everybody to the 7th European Symposium of the Societal Impact of Pain to SIP 2017. And the tagline is
structured cooperation between healthcare systems tackling the societal impact of pain.
We are in Malta, and this year the SIP is held under the auspice of the Maltese presidency of the Council of the European Union. This afternoon will be moderated by Neil Bederich. He's co-chair of the Chronic Pain Policy Coalition.
And by Michael von Fissen.
Yeah, well, this is your applause. Wait.
I've done nothing. Thank you. And by Michael von Fissen.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, you're being very nice to me at the moment, but as moderators, it's also our responsibility to be timekeepers. And we must keep a strict eye on this, partly because our final presenter is coming in via video link. So please, if presenters could stick to the 10 or 12 minutes to allow a couple of questions, that would be perfect. If you reach your 15 minutes, then either Michael or myself will, in a very friendly way, just make our way here. And the longer you speak, the friendlier we will get, until in the end we're probably hugging you and pulling you off the stage. So just as a courtesy to subsequent speakers, please stick to time. But more importantly, I'd like to welcome all of you here. And again, it's the usual fantastic mix of stakeholders, patient representatives, healthcare professionals, employers, insurers, policymakers, politicians. You are all equally welcome. And I think particularly we welcome this mix of perspectives because of the huge impact which chronic persistent pain has. With more than 100 million people in Europe living with some form of chronic pain, with 500 million sick days per year lost to the workforce, I think the numbers pretty much speak for themselves in describing the scale of the problem. But above all, whilst we must focus on the societal impact of pain, let us never forget the personal impact of pain, the impact it has on individuals living with pain in whatever the guise that takes.
And when we talk about pain, we especially mean chronic pain. And chronic pain, it's still an ongoing discussion. Is it a symptom? Is it a disease on its own? What are the characteristics? How is it defined? And it remains a dynamic process with different views. And hopefully, today, we can contribute to a better clarification. And maybe we are pretty close to a kind of consensus. A consensus is so important, as we also said yesterday, to go in the same direction. Let me now introduce our co-chairs. First of all, Liisa Juttila. Is it okay for you? Good. And she is from the Pain Alliance Europe. Then I would like to welcome Miroslav Mikulajic, member of the European Parliament. Welcome. Richard Muscat from the University of Malta. Also welcome. Rolf Detlef Trede, past president of the IASP. And Thomas Tölle from the European Pain Federation.
So maybe just before we get into the presentations, it might be good if we can just get a very brief couple of words from you as co-chairs on this topic we're looking at this afternoon, on the definition of chronic pain. So Liisa, maybe I could begin with you. I know as a patient advocate in your native Finland and in your work with the umbrella body, the Pain Alliance Europe, that you're very active on all sorts of issues relating to patient advocacy in chronic pain. So how important is this issue around the definition for you?
Well, to me, as a private person, it is important, of course. But patients overall, I think it's enormous. If you go to doctor, for example, you go to doctor and you get out and you don't have any diagnosis, and you go home, and they ask what's wrong with you, and you say, well, I have a chronic pain. It doesn't mean anything to anyone, and it's just, okay, maybe it's a mental illness because that's the only diagnosed number it has at the moment. So to have real proper diagnosis, it is important. And of course, if you have another illness, it is also really important that it is related to it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Miroslav, you're a politician and a doctor, so an ideal combination. What's your expectation of today?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm coming from Slovakia, and you mentioned chronic pain condition issue, which has been tabled by previous presidency, which was the Slovak one from my country. And I'm quite proud that chronic diseases, including the pain approach, was, tabled by Slovakia. Now, I'm already 13 years in the European Parliament, and yes, as a doctor, of course, I'm following dossiers which are dealing with illnesses, and this is a real chance, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, doctors, stakeholders. I think we are close to it. We have to have a good work. We had already 4 panels this morning, and we will continue. And we will have a definition, and we will have a kind of consensus which will push, and this is the key thing. As I said last year when I was for the first time among you, the push must be towards the government. And the government in Europe, his name is Commission. Commission has to take really action to prepare European common policies about pain, about economic consequences, about human approach among treatment, and all this is in the hands of the Commission. And as my colleagues have expressed on the video, there were some colleagues from European Parliament, I am prepared to help you to push the Commission forward in order to get and to deliver concrete action. Thank you.
Very important. Thank you very much.
And moving on to you, Richard, I know that one of the many things you're involved in is, at the moment in particular, is chairing an important working party for the European Council on behalf of the Maltese presidency. So how does this topic look for me? Because you're looking at horizontal drug therapies, aren't you? So you're really at the front line of these policy issues. How does this topic look from your perspective?
I think it's wonderful to, first of all, to be here. I'm a local, and as you rightly point out, one of the responsibilities of our presidency is to look at the drug action plan for Europe for 2017 and 2020. And in that action plan, which we hope will be passed by Council in the next 2 or 3 weeks, there are 60 actions, and number 8 is to do with access to opiate medications, which is, to us, fundamentally important because of the fact that there are a number of primarily heroin addicts who need to be given access to these types of medications. And the better we do it, the better the safety for the individuals per se, as well as the treatment. I think it's, in this day and age, not to provide these medications to someone who has been using heroin for a number of years and then removing the heroin. There's no endorphins in the brain left. Can you imagine what the patient feels like? So I think, as is only a little bit of your whole part of your symposium, but I think it's fundamentally important that access and availability does become more accessible, and things become more accessible, and we have an action plan now which will hopefully be accepted by Council in the next couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck with that.
And well, if you have a broader perspective, what is your impression so far? There's another microphone over there, so you have to.
I think from the perspective of the International Association for the Study of Pain, Europe and ZIP are something special that we unfortunately don't have in other parts of the world. That is a kind of a supranational body that can influence policy. And we are very proud to see that members of the European Parliament are solidly behind the ZIP activity. So ZIP means Society impact of pain, but I think ZIP already has an impact on policy in Europe. And this, I think, is very good and could then maybe be exported to Southeast Asia or other countries as well. But
And we're going to hear more from you later in your presentation.
on the topic of chronic pain.
On the topic of chronic pain. Now, Thomas, we would like, the topic is definition of chronic pain, and this is why we are having this symposium this afternoon, and hopefully to find a consensus. You prepared a starting definition, may I say that?
First, I would like to say that the scientific and clinical advisors in our steering committee were convinced that all would be nothing if we don't know what we are talking about. And so we must come close, very close to the definition of chronic pain and must have an impression. And what Lisa just said, is that if she leaves a praxis and she had explained her symptoms, she must know what this would be termed like and what would be the diagnosis and what would be the disease. And she would be pretty sad if she wouldn't hear this. And I think so you as doctors must know perfectly well what is our current thinking on that. And so we thought that as an introductory statement for all of us, this would be very relevant to start with.
I have the statement here.
Yes. And the statement would be that chronic pain can either coexist with other conditions or be the only diagnosis, and we would then call this chronic primary pain. So our discussion in preparation of this was that for centuries, pain was only looked upon as a symptom. And this is still in the head of many patients and many doctors. But this symptom is, of course, always there, but the concept has fundamentally changed. So we now know that this is a disease, and now we get close to a consensus to call this chronic primary pain. And Rolf Detlef Trede will speak about this. And then, of course, we also have accepted that this cannot be only primary, a disease of itself, what, like EFIC has suggested many years before, but of course also from an ordinary pain condition, like you read here, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, herpes zoster, there must be a development into this kind of chronic pain condition which is going its own way. Although it has started with something what you could really say was a somatic reason, it can develop into another direction. And so if we have the power to find consensus on this, and if we have the power to step out to our patients, to our colleagues, to policymakers, and say to them that we are convinced that we know what we are talking about, I think this is something you expect from us. And so we thought we start with this.
Good. We were going to hear you later in your presentation, so we take this as a teaser and a starting point. Neil, a lot to talk about, and to make it more convenient for you, the co-chairs, you can take your seats and to watch the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.